The Vatican has defrocked one of their most influential pro-life voices. Is this a coincidence? I think not. It seems unusual. It seems ungrateful to him for all of his efforts. The official notice conveying the news of his punishment does not mention any offense for which a priest usually loses his collar. It only points to a vague reference of blasphemous communications on social media. Interestingly, this letter was released via CNA, Catholic news agency, before Father Pavone himself knew of its very existence. It's an open question as to how CNA knew before he did, but the appearance of coordination between the ecclesial bureaucrats and religious media is similar to what we've seen in our corporate media and their coordination with bureaucrats in the FBI and the CIA. And very much like the corporate media, CNA goes to work running cover for the Vatican through a smear operation. The article references an instance when Father Pavone posted a picture on social media of an aborted fetus on a table. As horrifying as that may sound, that's more the fault of the reality of abortion than it is of the man who made the post. At the same time, there is absolutely nothing blasphemous about sharing the reality of what abortion is in order to deter people from doing that. The CNA article also references a post Father Pavone made where he swore and took the Lord's name in vain, an act he deeply regretted and went to confession for. Again, this is hardly blasphemous. The article is a failed attempt by CNA to do some CYA for what many recognize is an inexcusable form of punishment for a non-existent crime. Overly harsh punishment over trivial differences that do not amount to actual crimes? A central figure with popular support and a record of tangible devotion? If I don't know better, I'd say this act is a kind of dry run for the indictment and trial of Donald Trump. You have to admit there are a lot of similarities here, not the least of which is the idea that the Catholic Church is, like our government, being run by people who are actively seeking its destruction. I'm referring to a deep church doing to the faithful what the deep state is doing to her citizens who don't deserve it. Deliberate acts of negligence, conflicting messaging, open betrayal of allies, brazenly rewarding enemies, and corrupt people doing everything in their power to continue subjecting the most innocent among us to the most extreme abuses. You have to look at the types of priests who are still not laicized to see the depth of the problem. We have Father James Martin, an LGBT activist priest, who recently has been making open intimations that Jesus was gay. He's still a priest. Think about that. Then there's Father Michael Pfleger, formerly known as Obama's priest for his liberal activism for Democrat causes. He was asked to step down not because of his political activism, but because of a host of sex abuse scandals. Yet he remains a priest. And what about Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell? He too was asked to step down because it was discovered that he frequently used the gay hookup app Grindr on his phone. He's still a priest as well. What does this tell us? When it comes to liberal priests, blasphemy, abuse, and promiscuity, they usually get a slap on the wrist like these examples. This double standard is all too familiar, isn't it? With no sense of proportionality or precedent, we are left to wonder what the real offense here may be. Perhaps because this scenario is so familiar, the consensus was fast to form online. This move was entirely political. It's a conclusion that Father Pavone himself supports. In a statement released online, he relays personal accounts of decades of resistance from the church hierarchy, pushback from his ministry. Not from his ministry, but this is pushback against his ministry from the church. Desperate bishops demanding behind the scenes that he stop speaking so loudly about abortion and that he stops asking other priests to openly advocate for pro-life policies, even though they should all be advocating for pro-life policies. These stories fly in the face of what faithful Catholics believe is a fundamental purpose of the church, to stand as a defense against evil. The church, or rather those in charge, want to have it both ways in the abortion debate. That's why for almost half a century it was considered absurdly controversial to deny communion to pro-abortion Catholic politicians, despite their conscious cooperation in one of the most grave sins imaginable, the wholesale slaughter of helpless babies. And so, people like Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden are given a pass. They can denounce the SCOTUS decision as taking away women's rights, while at the same time waxing nostalgic about the importance of their faith. They wear their Catholicism on their sleeves while doing everything in their power to advance the cause of abortion in open defiance of church teaching. So it seems that Father Pavone's true crime is the same as Donald Trump's, being both conservative and effective. In both the American church and our government, you're allowed to be a shy conservative so long as you always reserve your long knife for the backs of your most ardent supporters, willing to throw them under the bus. But affect real change and upset the status quo? That makes you persona non grata. The defrocking of Father Pavone sent an unmistakable signal across the world. It will be remembered as the moment that the church leadership took off their masks to reveal that they are taking a turn down a dark road. If the church continues down the direction it's going, the church will cease to be nothing but a political body, subservient to leftist causes and diktats. Until now, church bureaucrats have been operating in the shadows, like the FBI, on social media. Now, finally, things are being made known in ways that are unmistakable. There is and has been a deep church operating in the bowels of the Vatican, just as there has been a swamp pulling the strings in D.C. As if to confirm everyone's suspicions, none other than Pope Francis himself was said to have opined on a Saturday Spanish TV interview that, quote, "When a priest gets involved in politics, it's not good. The priest is a pastor. He should help people make the right choices, accompany them. But don't be a politician. If you want to be a politician, leave the priesthood and become a politician," end quote. It's a curious sentiment, coming from a man who frequently makes broad statements condemning the ownership of guns or those demanding immigration controls. We've seen this two-step before. When you push leftist causes, you're just being factual. But if you push conservative causes, that's political. My question for Pope Francis is, since when did being pro-life become political? It shouldn't be. That's Father Pavone's passion, and it should be your passion too. And for the most part, the faithful have been willing to go along with the double standard, thereby ensuring that it is never addressed. Christians of all denominations seem to have forgotten that knowingly perpetuating injustice like this is wrong, even if it is Christians themselves who are the victims of that justice. This past year alone, threats and acts of intimidation against churches of all types have increased exponentially. As a form of political retribution against the SCOTUS decision, state police are literally dragging Christians from their homes to charge them with crimes. Biden has gone full Mussolini in tirades against his political opponents, all but promising more oppression and pain to avenge his anti-Christian constituents. Meanwhile, fashion houses like Balenciaga are promoting bondage, with some bold imagery often referencing Satanism. In the face of all this, what are you hearing from the pastors in the churches? Nothing. Silence. Are they engaged in these issues? Do they even know this is going on? I think they do, but it doesn't sound like it. And that's a sad fact to come to terms with. These are all issues deeply important to the Lord. So why are they silent? When was the last time you heard a pastor engage in a sermon about any of these important topics? It doesn't happen often. At this point in our history, being silent is no longer an option. Please speak to your priest, pastor, write your bishop or elder, or whoever you can about these important matters and demand that these issues be addressed by our spiritual leaders. In the face of public pressure and out of fear of being labeled political, many faith leaders are bowing their heads, not in prayer, but in subservience. No moral issue is political, so don't allow this excuse to fly without a response. There was a time when the act of refusing to worship Caesar as a god would get your whole family fed to lions in front of cheering crowds, or maybe tied and wrapped in wax and have your head set on fire in order to light the emperor's garden parties as a human candle. And what have Christians become today? Afraid of controversy, afraid to speak about what's right and what's true, and afraid of getting canceled. There's an old expression that says all evil needs to do to triumph is for the good to do nothing. In this hour of deception and betrayal, it's time to ask ourselves if we believe those who choose to remain silent were ever good at all.